Startup Hack. I'm Spencer Thomason, and here at Startup Hack, we love to train software developers and build custom software solutions. So I do a lot of work as a fractional CTO. With over a decade of executive leadership and a solid 25 years in software development, I've mastered the art of transforming technology, teams, and products. So today we're going to dive into a topic about why it's so hard to get a tech job right now. Now, there's a lot of feelings and thoughts and emotions, and I'm sure everybody knows somebody who's looking for a job, particularly new recent graduates or those who are trying to break into the field. So we're going to dive in today and talk a little bit about this. I've got a new report here that I want to go through that I thought was really interesting. So let's jump into this topic today because I want to talk a little bit about why we think that it's so hard to get a new job, and I thought this was a really good, concise report. All right, so let's jump into this here today, and I'm going to go a little bit unscripted, but I want to go through this report here that I found that was a really good, and I'll put the comments or the links down in the description section below, so you can check that out there. And with always, make sure that you check out our previous videos because we have tons of free coding samples. So if you're a new CS grad who's looking for a job, one of the biggest things you can do is keep your skills sharp and relevant. I know a lot of times people will be coming out of degrees with only a subset of skills, and so definitely good idea to dive in and try to find some good, useful, relevant skills. So this is, talking about why it's tough to get a new CS job right now. And he's talking about that there's a lot of people who are coming out and talking about that it's hard to get a job, and that, he'll attempt to provide some insights. Now, he wants to try to break through. He's saying that tech wasn't always amazing. Now, and I want to reiterate this, right? Before I begin, though, I want to be clear that trying to break in tech wasn't always amazing. So getting your first job in tech always has been a bit of a struggle. I guess that's one of the first things that he's pointing out here that I really want to make sure that I also point out as well. Getting into tech, your first job, has always been kind of tricky. I personally started actually while I was going to college at a technical support group. I was actually working at the electric company taking phone calls for people who wanted to call up and complain about their bills. And then they found out they had a software developer sitting on the phones. And so actually for the first year of development, of getting paid to develop, didn't get a raise or anything. I just got moved over at basically minimum wage and was just coding for the support group. So that was where I got my first year, and then I ended up staying in that job, and I finally got moved into an analyst role, right? But that job was my first development job, and that's kind of how I broke in. And I've heard a lot of other stories from similar people who have broken into their tech jobs this way. And so let me just always start, and that was 1999. So breaking into tech hasn't always been trivially simple. And that's one of the first things that I think he points out here that I would also really want to really make sure here. I only mention this so you don't get an impression that it's just a recent past. This has always been the case, right? Now, the supply side, there are more CS grads than ever. And this is a really fascinating, I don't hear enough people talking about this, right? So we saw that in the 1990s, we saw a big spike into the CS. This was when being a nerd, and this is, roughly around, I caught right around here. Then through the 2000s, humanity, I'm pointing at the wrong one. And so, I know a lot of people in this era, and then I caught through this era. So I actually graduated in 2005 with my computer science. And so, but I'd been coding for 5 years at that point. And so a lot of, there definitely was a peak there, right? But then we saw this big trough through 2010. And this is part of the reason why is because CS grads from 2010 to 2015 were at some of the lowest. And so I think as we saw some of the run into 2020, graduates were still really low. Coding boot camps hadn't really become a thing yet. People were still really requiring degrees. Going into really like 2015, people still really required a degree to be able to do full-time software development. So we can see that this, that this chart here really is telling a lot of the story actually of itself. And now we see a drop, this major drop over the last 15 years in humanities and this major rise in computer science. So for starters, there's just more competition. There's more people going into the space. And I don't care if you're talking about, the cost of hamburgers, or how hard it is to, to get a hamburger, right? Like whatever you're talking about with supply and demand, there's a supply and demand issue here, right? There's a lot of people and there's a lot of competition to this. So now, the thing that I would tell you is, point out these numbers explain the labor market supply increase, but begs the question of why there's a labor market supply increase. So he has a few theories, right? Word got out about tech jobs being good. I think so, right? Like I've talked a lot about how much I have enjoyed working in tech throughout my career, right? I love working in tech. I love the flexibility. I love the problem solving. I love everything about working in tech. And so for me, I'm definitely one of these people who think that, that it's worth it, right? And so I think that working in tech is really worth it in the long run. Now, the price of college changes the personal calculus, right? Growth in average student loan debt per student borrowers outpaced inflation most of the last 15 years, which increases the opportunity cost of getting an unlucrative degree in fields like humanities, right? So that's the other reason we're seeing this major drop here, right? Who wants to come out of school with $100,000 of student loan debt? And I think that's roughly right around where the average is. With $100,000 of student loan debt, to make $50,000 a year in a job that that most humanities are going to be hired for, whereas the same degree could then be sending you into six figures for a computer science. So I think that's the other reason why people have started to figure that out. I think ultimately people are figuring that out. Now, computers are cool now, right? When you look back at the top 10 richest people, when Barack Obama became president versus now, when Barack Obama became president, I think there was only one. I think it was Bill Gates was the only one in the top 10 that was the top 10 richest people in the world. Now, fast forward, and they're almost all tech, right? Computers just simply are cooler. I think the invent of these things also helped make that a little cooler, right? And then also, not to mention AI and a lot of other things lately that has just made computers, frankly, a lot cooler, right? So being a nerd has showed to pay. It has showed to, be good careers, right? So now let's talk a little bit about the demand side. Now, I really hate this chart, and I've talked about this chart over and over again. Frankly, I think one of the big reasons for this chart is I think you saw this inflation in Indeed because people were getting desperate. So I actually think this is a terrible chart because I know very few people in the tech world who hire off of Indeed and very few people who put their resumes. I've never once used Indeed, and I know a lot of people who've never touched Indeed. This is generally for other type of work. There's a lot of other specialized places. If you're going to go apply for a job, Indeed is one of the last places. But that's the point. I think everybody's kind of desperate, and I think that's the reason for this chart. I think when we saw this trough come in from the layoffs right after COVID, right, there was a scary 6 months there. Then we saw this run up, right, where people just could not get developers fast enough. And by 2022, people couldn't. And then we started to see the layoffs that happened in 2023, right? So you see this precipitous drop right here. But I really actually think part of this is because people didn't use Indeed. And so I think it's a skewed statistic. Now, this one is definitely a much closer statistic, and I do think there was a reality here, right? Companies with layoffs, and I'm more with the companies with layoffs than I am with the employees laid off. A lot of these numbers, as I've dug into them, are really skewed because, even layoffs.fyi, if we go out and look at this resource here, and I'm happy to dig into this and look. So as we even look into some of these layoffs on .fyi, you'll see that actually, and so that's companies with, and this is the layoff chart. You'll see as you break down into these that you're going to see a lot of these were jobs in the U.S. They were jobs for other reasons, right? And so this is really the chart here they're using. But you can see as we get into 2024, we definitely see that these numbers are, tracking down, right? And that's one of the big things, right? Definitely want to see that number tracking down. And we're seeing this number really start to track down to a lot lower, right? And again, some of these numbers, as you dig into them, are a little skewed because it'll be like a lot of those numbers were Intel, right, from most recent. And as you get into this too, not all of this is tech, right? So these layoffs are not all tech, and it'll say it's tech, but as I dig into it, it'll be like, well, it's Intel, and then or like Dell, for instance. Dell recently laid off like 12,000 all sales, but they labeled it as tech because it's Dell. So, some of this stuff I think is slightly skewed, right? And so we could dive into those datas, but ultimately, there's a peak in job postings. It's worth isolating the problem with tech hires from the demand side, right? So the U.S. tech sector job growth, and I thought this was a very interesting one because this is broken down, and this is actually from the BLS. These I can tell because these are the categories that the Bureau of Labor Management talks about. So software publishers, right? We can see employment in the tech sector stagnated in 2023, but has not declined, right? And so total tech sector employment, we see that it kind of leveled off a little bit here in 2023, right? But it is actually starting to come back up, right? We saw a little trough end of 2023, but it's starting to come back up again. Now, it's not at this growth rate that we saw through 2021, 2022, and into 2023. Why is that? Why? And I wish some of these charts stretched out further 20 years, because what you'll see here is you'll see that there was this unprecedented rise right here. And why was that? We saw the drop from COVID, right? The dip where everybody got scared in COVID, people weren't really sure what to do. And then the government started pumping in free money. And these corporations were able to capitalize on free money, and they were smart. Like, if you get free money, you can invest into R&D that's going to drive the growth of your company and inflate your valuation, right? And so you're going to pump that into your company, and that's exactly what we saw for 2 years, right? 2 exact years, interest rates were near zero, everything was low, and then they started raising rates. And you can literally throw your mark on the calendar right about here where you see this kind of start to level off a bit. It's because we saw interest rates go up, right? So for 18 to 20 months, interest rates were near zero, and the government was pumping out free money with stimulus to try to keep the economy afloat, but it was artificial. And now we're paying, and then this has been paying the price for that since then. So, you can see he even jumped into it, right? He even comes to the exact same conclusion. That's why I really liked this report. This guy and I see eye to eye. So and I do like this chart because this shows how bad this is, right? So interest rates are high, and not only are they high, so we saw a period of high interest rates, right? In the late teens, right? But it was growing, and it was about half of what it is today. And the other point is it stayed around for very little and then dropped. Now, granted, this precipitous drop here was when they cut them for COVID, right? And this I should have moved to this chart when I was talking about this a minute ago, but I wish you could kind of overlay these two over each other. So kind of think about this for a minute, because see, this steep growth of interest rates, look at right when that happened, January 2022, and everybody priced it in because they knew they were coming here at the end of 2022. Well, what did we see right here? Hey, look, at the end of 2022, Fed said, hey, we're going to raise rates. You see this little tick here, and then you see the flat line, right? And this is then where we see the slope. But remember that even from here to here is a couple % growth over that time. And that's even with interest rates at a historical high, and this chart's going back 15 years, right? And so even with interest rates at a historic high, we're still seeing a growth in the tech, right? So even from this bottom to here, or even from this peak to here, it's still a few % growth, about a 5% growth. And that's because tech is resilient. It's always going to be here. It's not going to go away, right? And so we're going to continue to see that. And so I think that's a really important thing. This is another part. And so Section 174 of the tax code, starting in 2022, the IRS changed how software development can be deducted by businesses through Section 174 of the tax code. This is the R&D tax credit. So if you've heard about the R&D tax credit, software development is now an R&D expense, which means it must be amortized over 5 years or 15 years for international hires instead of deducted up front. Now, there's a ton of jargon here, but the really thing is, so wait, isn't that good? It means 1 million revenue costs 2 million. No, it's actually super bad for software businesses. The issue is that businesses need to pay taxes on the profits, but not on the losses. So by distributing the cost over time, this pushes business tax closer to the present. I think what we're going to see is we'll see a Trump and line up Congress to get this fixed this next year, and I think we're going to see a huge correction in that. Now, FANG is hiring less, right? Because I'm going to go back to that chart here. FANG was one of the ones who led the way, right? Facebook announced 2023 was going to be the year of efficiency, right? And they kind of led the way, and everybody has really, and so efficiency is a huge word. in the market, right? If you want to get your investors really happy, talk about efficiencies, right? When I was first trying to raise money for Clean Router, which by the way is a great company if you want to, if you're a parent and you want to be able to filter the internet for your kids, check out Clean Router. We've sold tens of thousands of them. I think we're up to almost 50,000 units that we've sold. And when I was trying to raise money for Clean Router in around 2015, generally speaking, if you were over 100,000 per employee, you were considered a decent startup. I've just recently been talking with some other folks that are now saying that it has to be closer to 300,000 to be able to attract investors. So efficiency is at a level that's almost 3 times what it was 10 years ago. So it may seem like it's begging the question why companies are hiring less, but if the FANG, and so if you don't know what FANG is, it's Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, right? And I would say Netflix is kind of a, has been replaced maybe more with Microsoft, right? Not that Netflix is bad, but anyways, these were the big FANG jobs, right? So it's probably not the case of the desirable tech jobs. So, really thinking like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, right? Those are some of the big ones, because now it's like NVIDIA. So I don't know if FANG is NVIDIA now, but all of these guys are hiring less because they're trying to squeeze out efficiency, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you could have a company that you could run without any cost, you would do that. So, they're figuring out their efficiencies, right? And again, they rode this. They benefited from a lot of that free money through this 20-month run up, right? So they definitely benefited from these 0% interest rates right here, right? That's definitely part of what they were benefiting from. Now, hiring is hard now because lying and BSing has become more rampant. So this is kind of a big problem, right? Really, this is kind of the problem here, right? Is that people are able to kind of BS their way into it. And I know if you've worked among tech, one of the first things that I do is I always do a 10-minute phone screen with somebody. I'll ask for a 2 to 3 minute description of their experience. Generally, if they go into 5 minutes, I already know they're probably just really good at BSing. And then I dive right into a very simple set of technical questions. And I can usually flush out the BSing within 10 minutes. And again, this is because I've been around tech for a long time. So it's very easy for me to flush this out. But so that's part of the problem too, is that there's a lot of people who have kind of lived on the fringes of tech now, or have read enough blogs on how to do a tech interview that they can pass some of them. So now let's talk about AI, right? Because surprise, this is really a 2-for-1 blog post that is talking about here. And I really like this guy. I'm going to put this link down below because I really want to give this guy a bunch of clicks. So give him some love and go read this because I think it's a great write-up here. Venture money is flowing into capital-intensive AI projects, right? So it is going there, but we've got to see these guys find product market fit. I'm going to do another video tomorrow, so make sure you like and subscribe because we're going to hit that tomorrow about why, it's an interesting thing. There was this huge run up on AI, but then now what we're finding is, oh wait, we aren't going to build God. Instead, now we actually build a product market fit, right? So AI does make cheating the job easier, and this is a problem, right? Is if you've got AI in your quarter and you know how to use it, you can just literally blast out almost 1,000 resumes, 1,000 applications, and that's kind of annoying and freaky as a job hire. So AI is not actually taking your software jobs, and it probably will. I totally agree with this guy. Part of the reason that I agree with this is because, one, if we're going to see AI start taking jobs, there's a lot of other jobs it's going to take long before it takes developer jobs, right? So I'm really tired of hearing about that argument, right? AI, for a company update, AI bubble or not, seeing this a lot is coming. AI productivity. We're well positioned to gain efficiencies from AI tools and have invested deeply in training. Honestly, I think the best example I can see for AI is like Tesla. And I love Tesla, right? So don't think that I'm like poo-pooing on Tesla here, quite the opposite. But if you'll notice that Elon Musk said that Tesla was going to be fully self-driving, I think his first prediction was like the end of 2020. We're almost 5 years later. It still isn't full driving. And FSD is getting better and better every day, and it's very impressive. It's some of the most impressive AI, and I use that in air quotes, that we see out there today is Tesla's self-driving features. But that all being said, it's still only about 90%, right? I'm still taking over about 10% of the time. And I think that's what we're going to continue to see with AI. And so I think it's going to create a lot of jobs. I think there's still a ton of work to do. I think it's going to become a new tool that we're going to want to get built into everything. There are statistics that says over 90% of CEOs want to integrate AI somewhere into their platform or into their company over the next year. So I think that's going to take developers to do it. So my take here is this is a really good article. Make sure you go check it out. Also, make sure you hit up our other links. Here at Starter Pack, we love to train software developers in our coding boot camps, and we love to build custom software for folks. So make sure you reach out and hit me up. If you're hitting the coding boot camps at starterpack.com. If you are looking for some custom software to be built, that's starterpack.com/Spencer, and we will catch you guys next time. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel because we bring you lots of great tutorials and tips that every developer should know. See you next time.